program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the Eau Claire Area School Board. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
Here.
Commissioner Bika.
Here.
Commissioner Harder. Commissioner Klinkhammer.
Here.
Commissioner Luginbill.
Here.
Thank you very much. We will have at this time an open floor for the public to participate or make questions. Each citizen will be allowed up to 4 minutes to address the board, providing that there is new information that has not been previously shared at the meeting. We will not hear personal complaints of school personnel nor any person connected with the school system in a public forum. Our first and only speaker for tonight is Ms. Gina Caldwell.
Maywood Drive, 54703. I'm a Roosevelt parent, and I'm a social worker who works with youth and families that struggle with mental illness. I'm here today to ask the Eau Claire School Board to please consider adding a secure entrance to Roosevelt Elementary in 2019. If each board member could please take a moment to visualize yourself getting out of your car and walking a few yards to the front of Roosevelt Elementary. You ring the buzzer and you're greeted by a warm voice on the other side, and you're buzzed into the front door. You do not walk through a secure second door, and you are not let into a safe or secure office space. You walk into a small hallway and take 10 to 15 steps into a gymnasium. You look around the gym and you see 286 happy, smiley 5 to 11-year-olds at an all-school assembly. I'm asking you, as an Eau Claire School Board member, can you stand before all of the children of Roosevelt Elementary and say that you have done everything possible to make their first day of school as safe as all of the other schools in the Eau Claire School District? As a result of the funds allocated and approved by this board, all students in the 2019-2020 school year, elementary, middle, high school, and charter schools, will be walking through their front doors of their schools on their first day back, ensured that the board has taken extra precautions for their safety, except those 286 students at Roosevelt. This summer, your board approved to keep Roosevelt open as a 2-section elementary school. Thank you. On July 22nd, one of my son's 5th grade classmates, Emma, courageously came before this board and asked that this board consider adding to its agenda a discussion to add a secure and safe entrance to Roosevelt Elementary in 2019 so she could feel safe. On August 3rd, as we all know, a shooting that left 20 dead and dozens more injured at the El Paso Walmart marked the 250th mass shooting incident in 2019 in our country. The very next day, on August 4th, a shooting in Dayton, Ohio left 10 people dead and 27 others injured, marked the 251st mass shooting. Yet the very next day, on August 5th, you held a school board meeting, and Emma's request to add an agenda item to discuss the possibility for a secure and safe entrance to Roosevelt was left unanswered. It is still unanswered today and not on the agenda. We have all heard of Columbine, Sandy Hook, and Parkview. This is our reality in America today. We know this. Even our students are asked to practice what they would do in an event of an active shooter several times a year. I am here today to ask you on behalf of my son, his classmates, and as a parent of a Roosevelt Elementary student, to please add to your agenda and discuss opportunities to allocate funds to immediately start renovations to add a safe and secure entrance to Roosevelt in 2019. Having a safe and secure entrance to an Eau Claire school should not be determined by which school you attend. It should be a right reserved for every student in our district. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our next point in the agenda is the superintendent report.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. I'd like to review the upcoming events for the school board. On August 20th, the Eau Claire Virtual School Governance Board will meet at 4:30 p.m. On August 26th, there will be an all-day staff return to buildings, a wellness kickoff, and that will take place at each building. And of course, board members, you're invited to drop by at any school. On August 27th at 1 p.m., there will be a Budget Development Committee meeting. On September 3rd at 7 p.m., we will have the Family Advisory Council, and I will just say that has been moved to the first the first Tuesday in October. We won't ask the Family Advisory Council to come on the first day of school. On September 9th at 8:30 a.m., Policy and Governance Committee will meet. September 9th, we'll have a regular school board meeting. September 10th at 1 p.m., there will be a Budget Development Committee meeting. And also on September 10th at 4 p.m., there will be a meeting of the LEAP Committee. And all of the committee meetings that have been announced will take place here in the Administration Building. So tonight we have a special recognition, and we would like to recognize Spectrum Industries for its wonderful support and countless donations that they have provided to the school district. Steve Tandler, the liquidation manager, and Dave C., president of Spectrum, I think are here tonight. So if you could stand. So we're glad that you're here, and I know you want to have a few words to say. So we're going to ask you to step up here to the podium. And while you're doing that, I will say that in 2017, South teacher Randy Stanley reached out to see if they had any lockable charging carts to secure robots used in her classroom. And over 10 charging carts were donated, as well as 2 electric standing desks to Spiro SPRK and robots, and 4 collaboration tables that have a whiteboard top and charging ports, and those work perfectly with our iPads. Spectrum also donated the cabinet that we use right up here in the boardroom. So thank you, and I know you have a few words you want to say.
Thank you very much. I've worked with Randy now for maybe about 2 years. We do work all over the country with schools. We most enjoy working with the local people. Randy has been very helpful to us because she's very passionate about her job. And when you're promoting products to a certain school, it's nice for every time you go over there, you get an education about technology. So she's done a lot for us, and but I want every school in Eau Claire and Chippewa Falls and all the area to know that we're here to help people, and we want to help people get up to speed in technology, and it's about as simple as that. And I grew up in Eau Claire. My family were teachers, so I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your support, and thank you for coming tonight.
I just want to say, I don't need the mic probably being the teacher voice, but as being a career and technical ed teacher and being business and marketing certified, having a business relationships have to flourish, and I am so ever grateful to have that partnership with Spectrum. And whenever I have a student that certainly wows me, I give them wild and wacky socks. So today is no different, and so I have wild and wacky socks, which are with 100 grand candy bars on them, because that is how much I'm so worth the value and then some for us. So I hope you can value them, wear them if you want, have your silly and wild wacky days as keeping in remembrance of our 6th graders as they were.
Somebody put me in a different office tomorrow. Thank you very much.
So we're often able to recognize our business partners, which is certainly an important part of our strategic plan, reaching out to the community and connecting with them. Typically, they receive a certificate. I think this is the first time that they've received socks, so you're in your company. The next thing I want to do is I want to recognize schools that have received recognition from the Wisconsin Response to Intervention Center, sometimes known as the RTI Center. Their mission is to build the capacity of Wisconsin schools to develop and sustain equitable, multi-level systems of supports to ensure the success for all students. Recognition is given in the content areas of reading, mathematics, and behavior. And recognition is noted at the bronze, silver, gold, and platinum level, depending on the years of implementation and the years of fidelity to the program. So this evening, we're recognizing the recipients of the bronze recognition, and we're going to start with Flynn Elementary School, and they are being recognized for behavior, math, and reading. And I think their principal, Adam Keaton, is here. Yes, so Adam, just stand up. And I'm going to ask that you hold your applause till they're all. You just keep standing, Adam. We also have Colleen Miner here. She's the principal of Lakeshore Elementary, and they are being recognized for math. Kurt Madsen from Meadowview Elementary, and they're being recognized for their work with behavior. Luke Stortle and Northwoods Elementary is being recognized for math. Putnam Elementary is being recognized for math and reading, and their principal, Heidi Newman-Neeland, is here. Roosevelt Elementary is being recognized for reading and math when their principal, Ben Dahlman, is here. Principal Joel Dimmock is representing Sherman Elementary, and they're being recognized for reading. Principal Tim Scootley is here, and North Star Middle School is being recognized for behavior. Our new interim principal, Dave Oldenburg, is here representing Memorial High School, and he has his administrative team with him. And they should stand because they're the people who have done all this hard work, and they're being recognized for behavior, as is North High School, and their principal, Cale Bushman, is here. So thank you for your great work. So today we had a very exciting day. This was, I won't say it's the first official day of school because that happens when the principals come back for their administrative retreat, but we welcomed 72 new teachers to Eau Claire today at North High School, and they began a 4-day workshop that will help welcome them and induct them into the ECASD. And we had a very nice lunch that was provided for us by Mark Goings and his group, and we appreciate the partnership that we have, Mark, with you, and the welcome that you gave the teachers. And I think all in all, it was a very productive day, and we're all off to a good start. So I want to officially welcome all of our new teachers, and I think we might have 1 or 2 more to hire. So you'll be seeing a few more teachers on your employment report. But very good job, and I want to commend the HR department because everything was very organized, and I think we set a good tone for the first day, so thank you.
Point in the agenda is the board president's report. I have 2 items to share. The first one just mentioned that I had the privilege this morning to welcome the new teachers, the new cohort of teachers. And as Dr. Hardebeck said, you could feel they were very excited, and we were excited with them. So thank you for a well-organized event, and looking forward to those great results. The second one is over the past couple weeks, I had been emailing back and forth and having a conversation with other representatives of other school boards across the state coordinated an effort to have a resolution approved throughout the territory in support of the banning of the use of indigenous symbols and imagery as mascots in schools. So there has been a draft that I forwarded you for comments and enrichment, and a final version of it should have been included in the board documents, but I don't see it unless I don't see it. It's not there? Okay. So we can discuss about the resolution after the report, and perhaps we can approve it next on our next session. So that was my report. Let's go on now to school board committee reports. I can begin with P&G. We did not meet this morning because we had to attend the orientation. We'll meet in 15 days. LEAP.
Our next meeting is scheduled for September 10th.
Budget development. Aram is not in tonight. Who's missing?
Our next meeting is next week on Tuesday.
Tuesday, okay, thank you. Demo and trends.
We're currently scheduling our next meeting.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to our legislative update. Is there any? Not this week. Thank you very much. So we can move on to our consent resolution agenda. We will consider all these items at once. Minutes of August the 5th, 2019. Minutes of closed session, August 5th, 2019. 2018-2019 budget adjustments. Gifts in the amount of $82,815.25 for the period of July 1st, 2019 through July 31st, 2019. Payment of all bills in the amount of $10,842,460.66, and net payroll in the amount of $3,298,966.71 for the period of July 1st, 2019 through July 31st, 2019, and the Human Resources Employment Report. I need a motion to approve the consent resolution agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Second. Do we have any? We have budget adjustments, so we need a roll call to approve.
Commissioner Torres,
Yes.
Commissioner Vu,
Yes.
Commissioner Nordin,
Yes.
Commissioner Bica,
Yes.
Commissioner Klinkhammer,
Yes.
Commissioner Luganbell.
Yes.
Thank you very much. We have approved the consent resolution agenda. Dr. Hardebeck?
Thank you. So with the approval of the consent agenda, you also approved the appointments of 2 administrators. So I'm going to first introduce the new interim principal of Memorial High School, and that's a face that's familiar to all of us, Dave Oldenburg. Dave, would you stand? So Dave began with the Eau Claire Area School District in 2005 as the Dean of Students at Memorial High School. He worked in this position for 2 years before leaving to work as the assistant principal at Holman High School. In 2009, Dave returned as the principal at Memorial High School, where he stayed until he moved to the district office as a director of academic services in 2016. Throughout his teaching career, Dave has taught social studies, driver's education, and he's also served as an athletic director. He also served as the principal at Loyal Junior High School from 2002 to 2005. Dave holds a master's degree in education from Winona State University and a bachelor's degree in political science from UW-Stevens Point. He holds licenses through the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction as a principal, a teacher, and a superintendent. So, Dave, welcome to your new position. It should be a little bit like going home for you, and we look forward to your leadership. So, coming home and going home seems to be a little bit of a theme tonight. I'm going to introduce to you Mike Pernsteiner. Mike, stand up. He is going to be the new assistant principal who is also going to serve as the athletic director at North High School. So Mike began his career in education at Moisey High School teaching social studies from 1999 to 2000. He then moved to Wausau West to teach special education from 2000 to 2005, and then to Oliva Strum to teach special education from 2005 to 2006. Mike taught special education from 2006 to 2017 at North High School in Eau Claire. And while teaching in Eau Claire, Mike was also the head wrestling coach. In 2017, Mike left Eau Claire to work as the athletic and activities director at Wausau East High School and is now coming home to North High School. So Mike received a master's degree in education from UW-Stevens Point in 2004 and a bachelor's degree in education from UW-Stevens Point in 1998. And he holds licenses from the Department of Public Instruction in teaching social studies, special education, and also as a principal. So Mike, we're glad that you're back. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. You might think that this is a little bit unusual tech refresh and budget update, but we wanted to provide you with the context to make the decision that you're going to be asked to make tonight. So I'm going to review the budget information and where we are today, and then Mr. Schmidt will talk about the technology refresh. So a friendly reminder about the district's budget. Every year we like to talk about it in terms of a dollar. And so what you'll know and remember is that about 78% of our budget is tied up in our people costs, which is our salary and benefits. About 16% of our budget is related to contracted services, 4% is related to supplies, 1% to capital and equipment purchases, and about 1% to insurance and debt and other types of those items. And so our budget varies a little bit each year in those categories, but the biggest piece is always related to salaries and fringes. I wanted to remind the board of decisions that they've made already previously this year. And so we started with the 18-19 deficit, which was the board adopted about a $3.2 million deficit a year ago in October. Things that the board is committed to already was the change for the 1920 health insurance, which was $273,000. CPI cost was approved by the board at about $168,000, and then salary level movement at about 1.5. So just starting with the 18-19 adopted deficit and these changes, we were projecting about a $5.2 million deficit. Now tonight you're going to be asked to make a decision on option A, which is a technology refresh at a cost of about $645,000, or option B at a cost of $189,331. we wanted to kind of foreshadow that for you, and we'll explain that in detail when we get through the rest of the budget update. But we wanted to make sure that you knew what you were going to be asked. We also wanted to remind the board of things that have been deferred over the last couple of years. You remember we've been talking about band uniforms for North High School, musical instruments for the 5 secondary schools, the buildings and grounds equipment, technology refresh, and athletic fee reduction. I'm sure there's other things that are on the list, but those are the key things that we continue to talk about year after year and have to make tough decisions on if we're going to move forward or what does that look like for the next year. A reminder of the important things to know about our budget is our budget's very open. We come in front of the board many times between August and October to discuss things. We talk about it at budget development and try to get some ideas of where the board's priorities are and how do they tie to the strategic plan. We always start each year's budget with a zero-based approach. 3 years ago, we implemented a staffing formula, and now that ESSA has come in, the district is used the staffing guidelines to make sure we're meeting those federal guidelines for ESSA and also ensuring equity of schools. When we start at zero, we talk with every department, every school building, principals, staff involved. There's lots and lots of employee input into that budget, and everybody that is involved in there has an opportunity to share what are their needs for that current year. All of those requests are considered, and we look at them in the big picture of the district budget as well as the building budget, and also how does that impact ESSA, because that is something that we need to make sure that there's equity among all of the students. Staffing, just a quick reminder, is we approach that staffing model using the mid-targeted class size policy. And so the board has established that policy, and we've been using that to determine what those sizes should look like. And then each department outside of that class size policy is also evaluated for student needs and requirements of the legislature and the law as well. One of the advantages is that we're always looking at our program and our expenses. We're looking at what's required by the state, what do we want to do as a district, and how does that meet our strategic plan. And the advantages we have is we're looking at our full operations every year to see how did things kind of play out, what we thought, what's different for the upcoming year. Our budget timeline is pretty unusual because we start our fiscal year without a budget. And so just a reminder, we start the 2019-20 budget process in January. And in February, we're meeting with those budget administrators. In March, we're going through the staffing process. April to May, our staff are building their budgets and what their requests are, and then we begin reviewing them as an administrative team, as a building, to try to see what have we missed, what needs are different. In July, we get our early estimated aid from DPI, so that kind of gives us a target on the revenue limit that we're shooting for. In August, we present an update just like we're doing tonight. In September, what's critical to us is the third Friday count and how many students are there at that count date, because that's a big factor in our revenue limit calculation. On October 15th, we get our final revenue limit certified to us from DPI. And then from October 15th to October 25th, we finalize our budget, make any changes that we need to make that are tied to that revenue limit number that we receive on October 15th. And this year, on October 28th, the board will be asked to adopt the 19-20 budget. Now, keep in mind, our fiscal year started in July, so we've had 4 months of operations before we know what our final budget is. With a little bit more detail, when we break it out by month, we wanted to share a sample with the board of who's all involved at what levels. And so in the month of January, we're finalizing the budget instructions and goals for that next year, and that's done in the Business Services Department. When we look at February, there's meetings with all staff involved that have budget responsibilities. So it's the Business Service Department, its principals, its directors. March through September, the staffing process is ongoing, and that's going to involve the Human Resource Department, the principals, and the executive team. March through April, we have staff entering and preparing the budget requests. That could be department chairs, it could be building secretaries, it could be principals and administrators. July 1st, we get that aid estimate from DPI, and that comes directly to Business Services. In the months of May through September, we're reviewing those budget requests, we're processing them, we're developing budgets, we're reconciling, we're reviewing, we're reducing if we need to. And again, that's all happening in business services, administration, and buildings as well. In September, we have students arrive, and the important day in September is that third Friday when we actually physically count the students that are here. And we're also finalizing our staffing because sometimes things fluctuate those first few weeks of school when students are back. And that impacts all staff. It impacts the Executive Director of Administration office and buildings, human resources, principals, and again, the exec team. On October 15th, we get that final aid certification. And then the 16th through the 25th, the Business Services Department is updating the pieces of our budget that need to be updated that are tied to the revenue limit calculation. And then on October 28th, the full school board gets the pleasure of adopting the 1920 budget. Keep in mind, we're working through this right now, and those numbers are changing daily. We're reviewing them, we're reconciling, we're making reductions if we need to. And so the things that happen for sure in September and October that are tied to the revenue limit could be staffing, that third Friday student count. Our state aid and computer aid numbers are also finalized on that October 15th aid certification. The tax levy is finalized with that aid certification. Our transportation contract, you will remember, also mirrors our revenue limit increase or decrease. And then just that final budget reconciliation. Staffing is, you would think staffing would be all ready to go and set by the beginning of September, but because we may have more students show up or less students, it's kind of still an ongoing process in that early September piece. And then we want to make sure that our count is accurate so that way we get the maximum amount of revenue that we're eligible for on October 15th. And once that revenue limit is finalized on October 15th, that you will remember that our revenue limit's about 90% of our revenue budget, and so that's very critical. We want it to be as accurate as we can be. So now I'm going to move into showing you where we're at today, August 19th with our current budget. If we look at the salary and fringe category, our 18-19 actual was just over 107 million. Our projections for 19-20 is that expense is going to be about 113 million. Our contracted services, we spent about 24.3 million. Our estimate for 19-20 is currently at 24.1 million. Our supplies are just about 5.2 million. Our estimated budget for next year is about 5.3. When we look at our capital, which is equipment, last year we spent about 1.4 million. Our current estimate is 1.2 million. Our insurance costs were about 950,000, and we're projecting 980,000. And our debt, other dues and fees currently is we spent 284,000. We're at 164,000 today. Keep in mind that these numbers are still being reviewed, they're being reconciled and reduced as necessary. So if you ask me what these numbers are in a week or a month, they will likely be different because we're still going through that process. The thing to keep in mind is that the iPads that were purchased last year in 18-19, that was about 724,000, and that's in the supply category, just in case you needed a refresher. And tonight we'll be able to show you a couple of options for technology that would have an impact on that budget as well. If we look at our operating revenue and where we're at today, again, this is we're still reconciling, reviewing, and reducing and adjusting based upon additional information that we're getting. But you can see our local source revenues, which is our tax levy essentially, for last year was just over 53 million. And next year we're predicting just a little bit more, about $300,000 more. That's good news for the taxpayers in Eau Claire because that means there's not a significant change in that tax levy for the taxpayers. When we look at interdistricts within Wisconsin, that we got about 2.5 last year, we're projecting about a 2.5 for 19-20. Our intermediate source is going to be typically grants that are coming to us from other agencies. We received 937,000 in 18-19, and we're projecting about 800,000 for 19-20. State source is where we're going to see the biggest difference, and you can see we received just over 77 million in 2019, and in 2020 our budget's 81 million. And I'd like to remind the board that the big difference is that per pupil aid adjustment that we get. So in 18-19 we got $654 per pupil, and the budget for next year is $742 per pupil. So that's a significant impact to our budget for our 11,300 students, and that's the biggest item change in there. When we look at our federal source, we received about 4.6 million. We're projecting about 4.6 million. In our other revenue, last year we received about 1.5 million, and we're projecting about 1.1 million. Again, these numbers will change. Obviously, we know October 15th will have some changes within some of those categories as well. And as we're refining and reviewing, they just change on a daily basis right now. So I'm ready to turn it over to Mr. Schmidt for any technology questions, and then we can take questions as a whole at the end.
Good evening. So when we met with
Just a minute, Jim. Abby, before we begin the technology piece, could you let the board know what was deferred last year in terms of our expenses and needs?
This, are we talking about the slide?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. So band uniforms, and we estimated that cost to be about 150,000, I think. Hold on just a moment. Yeah, I think what we had requested in the budget last year that was deferred was the band uniforms, and we estimated that cost to be about 150,000. Musical instruments, I think the board will remember, we had gotten onto a 3-year rotation, and we had planned to spend 150,000 each year. Last year, we only did 50,000. So that would leave 100,000 deferred. Buildings and grounds equipment, I think you'll remember that most of that was cut out of the budget, and that estimate is about 375,000 from last year, and I know there's new needs identified for this year. The technology refresh, you'll remember last year we did about, I think the board approved about 775,000. And so that left about 1.8, because our original estimate was about 2.5 million to refresh all of that. And then there's been some discussion about athletic fee reductions, and that's about $250,000 as well. I didn't add them all together, but you can see there's some significant needs that we have been deferring last year and even the year before as well.
So the reason that I asked Abby to review that information with you is that it's important to keep emphasizing and clarifying that our budget projections are not finalized to date. They are also not reconciled. We know that last year we were in a deficit situation. This year, receiving a little bit more aid from the state. We're hoping to reduce that deficit drastically while still being able to tend to some of the priorities that we identified last year. Certainly technology is a big ticket item, and we're looking for ways that we might be able to mediate that big ticket item so to offset some of the things that you had to defer last year. So as to what our deficit, if we have a deficit, will happen this year remains to be seen. We are still working. And as Abby said, and I think she emphasized several times, we have gone through the budgets, we continue to reduce. And this is one way that we could reduce costs in technology. And so at this point, yep, I would ask you to kind of step in.
Absolutely. So if you think about last year, you approved the purchase of iPads for grades 3 and 4 and for 6th grade at DeLong. That was a cycle that began refreshing the devices, and James Martin shared that with us last meeting. If you think of that as year one, what we're looking at is a 4-year process of bringing all the devices back around again so that they all don't expire at the same time. So what you're going to see right now is two options. The first option, A, is what we presented to you 2 weeks ago. Option B only differs in the financing of those same number of devices to allow the flexibility for the board to address items that have been deferred in other areas. So the identified needs are in the green, and we shared that last week, or 2 weeks ago. And these are the numbers that were shared with the board with the net cost if we do a purchase of $645,000. Option B addresses the same number of devices. So as we see these devices here, these same number of devices, but does them on a 4-year leasing plan. That 4-year leasing plan costs a little bit more than an outright purchase, and you still end up owning the devices at the end. But it again spreads the expenses over 4 years. So this the current year that we're in, the cost to refresh the iPads for 5th grade and for 6th grade at North Star and South. And 1/4 of the Chromebook replacement at the high schools would, if we did a lease, would be $189,331 this year. And then this would be the price each of the following years for those to support the purchase of those devices. At the end of, the reason for the difference in numbers, why year 1 is different than years 2 through 4, is that we have to buy a one-time purchase of cases for the iPads. And so the difference of 189 and 161 is simply a one-time purchase of cases. And then, so embedded in here is $161,531 for devices, and then we have to pay for those over the next 4 years as well. So this is year 2. Year 3, we would look at purchasing another 1/4 of the devices for the high school, and then the staff devices that need to be refreshed. And then year 4, we would purchase the remaining 1/2 of the devices for the high school. Whether it's a purchase or a lease on that year 3 and 4, I think depends. There's been some uncertainty with how the state has been supporting technology. For example, they had supported 9th grade devices purchased up until, for the last few years up until this year, and then it was cut at the budget the last moment. So, but there's always been talk about trying to reinstitute technology support through the state budget with schools. So given that uncertainty, we don't know what next year would look like, whether it would be a purchase or another lease that would lay on top of this. I think part of it is we're going to wait to see what we learn in the next year from the state. So this gets us to the same, this year gets the cost this year, the budget gets us to the same number of devices. It just spreads those costs over 4 years. So it's a different methodology. And so we call this option A, which is what we presented last time. Option B, again, same number of devices, pay for them over 4 years. And so the thing that in front of the board is to either vote on option A or B, and then our recommendation is option B, just because it provides that flexibility and space in the budget for the board to consider other priorities that have been deferred. And that's the end of it. Yeah, so if you have questions, yes, this is the moment.
Questions? Commissioner Luganville?
I move approval of option B.
Second?
There is a motion to approve motion B and a second. Commentaries or questions? Discussion? I think it's the smart thing to do. Commissioner Vu?
I do have a question though. Being that technology has more direct tie with academic, if you go with option B, am I hearing correctly, there's no interfere with academic standard testing, for example, using technology?
Mr. Schmidt, could you talk about how testing will be handled under this model?
So we also have some other devices that are on the cycle later that will be refreshed, but we will likely test at the high school, the 2 high schools on different dates, so that we can move devices from one school to the next to make sure that we can still accomplish the state testing. In the past, we tested both schools on the same day. We wouldn't do that this year.
Any other question? If not, we'll do a roll call to vote. No questions? Thank you. So we'll proceed with a roll call.
Commissioner Torres,
Yes?
Commissioner Vu,
Yes.
Commissioner Nordin,
Yes.
Commissioner Bika,
Yes.
Commissioner Klinkhammer,
Yes.
Commissioner Luganville.
Yes.
Thank you very much. The motion carries. Thank you, Jim and Abby, for their report. Looking forward to more opportunities to save money and use it more efficiently.
Thank you. I'm ready for the next, I'm just staying up here for the next couple as well.
Thank you. And that's the review of Act 31.
So the request was for this to be connected to the resolution. Sounds like the resolution was is not something that will happen tonight, but we'll still give you the background information.
Just a technical question.
Yeah.
Could we project the resolution on the screen? It's the same one that I forwarded. Because there were no modifications. Thank you. So we can.
Could we print copies out?
Thank you. So we can discuss the resolution after the presentation. Thank you.
You bet. Do you need a moment, Maida? Okay. All right, so we were asked to give an update on Act 31 in the district in terms of the work that's been done and the work that will be done. And joining me, I'm glad to say I come with some friends. Dave Oldenburg is a little bit of a temporary swan song on his role in the academic services. And then Maggie Jensen, our American Indian coordinator. So we are going to bring you through those different items, and then if you have questions before you discuss the resolution, we'll be happy to take those. So the ties, and I think you'll see as we go through this, to the strategic plan, and Dave will really dig into the first two areas of the strategic plan when he talks about specific ways that the curriculum addresses Act 31. And then we'll also talk about, with Maggie's work, about how we support families through her work, and also how we help support our staff in terms of their training and understanding of Act 31 expectations. We have the definition here. Again, it requires all public school districts to provide instruction. And again, the focus is around the history, sovereignty, and culture of the 11 federally recognized tribes and bands in Wisconsin. So it's not for any other group, it's really around those bands. And so we must include curriculum at least twice during the elementary years and once in high school. And happy to say you'll see even we've gone above and beyond that. And our teachers in Wisconsin also must be instructed in that area in terms of their licensure as well. So when we see, one of the things we see when staff move from another state to this state is making sure they meet that requirement, because that's something that Wisconsin has an expectation for their staff. And so Dave's going to dig into in a moment, again, the part that we're going to share is the guaranteed viable curriculum on our multi-level system of support, because it's really through that we provide that opportunity for students to, or for the curriculum and understanding of the content standards that are expected from Act 31. And so Dave right now is going to walk you through that piece, and then Maggie will follow up with the work that she's doing with our families and staff.
All right, thanks, Jim. So we know that Act 31 passed in Wisconsin in 1989, and then it was updated in 1991, and as Jim mentioned, it gave expectations to districts on the curricular location of when Native American history, studies, and language should be exposed to students, and that gave you a minimum district-wide, so it normed us district-wide. As Jim also mentioned, I think we're happy that we can report here in Eau Claire that we certainly meet and exceed what the intent of Act 31 was as it was originally constructed. So as we go through here, you can see in first grade, our students, the learning targets, the goals for first grader would be to be able to identify Native Americans as the first people that live in the United States, and that students then have an opportunity to celebrate the accomplishments of Native Americans in the past, and then incorporate Native American accomplishments throughout different events in U.S. history. Remember, designed for first grade learning. Students also get to do some comparison between Navajo and Seminole Indians, their culture, their lifestyle, what might be similar, what might be different, past and present, to put some context on what a member of a tribe might be and what some differences and similarities are. In grade 2, we continue this work and talk about traditions, cultures, and contributions of one Native American group from another. And we talk about the 6 regions in the United States that are studied and compared. Then in grade 3, there's a study of local connections. Students learn about history, culture, and the current status of the Ojibwa people. Students also examine how Ojibwa culture and lifestyles have changed over the time since immigration of other groups into the area. Grade 4, there's a heavier emphasis on Wisconsin history, and you'll see that while students study each region of the United States, students become very familiar with the history and culture of the tribes from each region with an emphasis on Wisconsin history. Students will study the Wisconsin tribes in greater depth, including learning about their culture, history, historical sovereignty, sovereignty today, what that means, and the current status of the tribes such as the Ojibwa, Lakota, Winnebago, Menominee, and the Black Hawk. And then in grade 5, while studying the history of North America, and specifically the United States, students will examine the culture of ancient civilizations and the impact of exploration and settlements on those civilizations that were present. And the emphasis in that 5th grade is that civilizations present here in North America, specifically the United States, when colonization began. Students will also examine Native American groups from each of the regions again, so it's a little bit of a review of what happens in an earlier grade, grade 3 specifically, and how events on our nation's history have affected, again, these groups of people. As we get into secondary curriculums, you can see the elementary curriculum is more topical, and we're talking about cultures and tribes and groups of people. You see a little bit more thematic or a linear historical presentation as you get into the secondary level. At grade 8, we talk about the colonialization unit and then also the expansion and conflicts that come with colonialization and then the westward expansion. So the objective in grade 8 is that students can explain the impact of early American colonialism on Native American life throughout the progress of the westward expansion. And then circling back a little bit later in 8th grade, students then will be able to explain how industrial progress in that westward expansion dislocated American people, again, reinforcing some of the things we talk about in elementary school about the civilizations that were present as expansion westward occurred. When you get into grade 9 and talking about U.S. history, there's a real interesting unit in Unit 4 in the 60s and how the emerging advocation for social change and different groups of folks, people of color, women's rights, Hispanic and Latino rights, also Native American rights, and rallying for their voice to be heard in that tumultuous time of the 60s. So we want students to be able to identify the social changes and the rallying points of these groups of folks, these people. And then in grade 9, in the U.S. government, we begin to talk about tribal sovereignty. What does that mean to have tribal sovereignty in relation to federalism? So the introduction of the term federalism as well. And then we evaluate treaty rights. Our students spend time on what treaty rights mean, why we have treaty rights. And then I'll also explain voting rights and patterns of many cultural groups, Native Americans specifically here. In grade 9 in AP U.S. history, there's a focus on naming and identifying Native American societies and cultures. You can see there's some previous learning that we loop around here. And then a significant unit on pre-colonialization and then post-colonialization. Again, you can rebuttress some of the learning that happened in the earlier American history courses. And then explain the impact of these cultures of that early colonial period, and that's really a heavy emphasis in AP US. And then as you move into AP US government, you can see that students have an opportunity to explain and apply the 14th Amendment now, the Equal Protection Clause, as it supports the advancements of equality of all peoples, and then talk about some of the historical pieces that we mentioned earlier, the 60s unit specifically, and that learning through the lens of the Constitution, specifically here, the 14th Amendment, as we mentioned, in the Equal Protection Clause. And then students will also be able to learn how these provisions in the Constitution and rallying for specific rights have supported social movements and rights and identification and political movement of different groups. So that is where the curricular pieces that you'll find that supports Act 31, and as I mentioned, the minimums that were set forth in 1989 and then again in 1981, I think it's confident to say that we meet or exceed.
I work with the Title VI program here. So that is a federally funded program through the Department of Education. And the purpose of that is really follow 4 objectives, which are geared on achievement of graduation, increased graduation rates, increased academic achievement, attendance, and then also identity development. So what I do is work with students and families if they are having lower attendance or grades. That's why I really collaborate with the family and teachers or more likely counselors in the school to see how we can increase those achievements and help the students that are struggling. So I'm also able to work with another program called the Johnson O'Malley program. We really collaborate. That's ran through the Ho-Chunk Nation, and they have a community liaison that I work with. A lot of our students in each program overlap. So with that program, we really try to get parents together for monthly or bi-monthly meetings or some sort of cultural activity or social to get parents connected with each other to help them understand more about the resources that are available at the school district for their children. And then we, through that program and the community liaison at Ho-Chunk Nation is where I'm able to collaborate some with the resources they have for their enrolled students. And their students have, well, that particular tribe has a K through 12 program for their students in kindergarten up until senior year of high school, and then they have a higher education program that they start to get more involved in the last few years of their high school career. So as I also get to interact on a level with other tribes, typically like emails exchanges, or if I've had the opportunity to meet some of the staffing at like St. Croix or Coudray, and those typically are less than Ho-Chunk Nation since we have more Ho-Chunk students enrolled here. I also do have the opportunity to collaborate with DPI, with David O'Connor. If there's any resources that teachers or principals are interested in, like having maps in their schools or just kind of curious about resources they may have, I will sometimes connect with him to get information. And they also provide a lot of resources on their website about tribal MOUs and different things for curriculum, as well as things that could be used to help parents as well. So the policy 886 was put in place to engage neighboring tribal nations and to ensure the meaningful collaboration that will be made between the school district and our tribal partners. And this collaboration will strengthen the work that we do for our students. And I will be working with Dr. Zhang and other members just to help this along. Something that I'm pretty excited about, as there are a lot of more tribes now because of the state really putting more pressure on to communicate, having the government-to-government relationships with tribes and school districts. And we'll be providing the board with a update or a memo when these rules are complete.
Did you have any questions for us before you had your discussion on the resolution in terms of Act 31?
Questions from board members? Hearing none, we will thank you for the report. And in your hands, there is the resolution that is for our consideration tonight. We have some technical difficulties, so we cannot project them on the screen, but you have read it. Shall we read it? Take turns to read one for us. We can take care of it in 3 minutes. Yes?
Sounds good.
Okay. So how about we begin from the left? Dr. Bika, would you start, please?
Whereas the continue to the top, resolution in support of state legislation requiring school districts to... Thank you. User errors. Resolution in support of state legislation requiring school districts to stop the institutional use of Native American symbols, images, logos, and nicknames as mascots. Whereas the continued use of the Native American symbols, images, logos, and nicknames as mascots undermines the educational experiences of members of all communities. And whereas the continued use of Native American symbols, images, logos, and nicknames as mascots effectively teaches non-Native American children that it is acceptable to engage in culturally abusive behavior and perpetuate inaccurate misconceptions about Native American people, culture, history, sovereignty, government, customs, and traditions.
And whereas the continued use of Native American symbols, images, logos, and nicknames as mascots establishes an unwelcome, divisive, unsafe, and hostile learning environment for Native American students that affirms negative stereotypes that are promoted in mainstream society.
And whereas the continued use of Native American symbols, images, logos, and nicknames as mascots is an offensive and intolerable practice to Native American tribal nations that must be eradicated. And whereas the continued use of Native American symbols, images, logos, and nicknames as mascots has a negative impact on other communities by allowing for the perpetuation of stereotypes and stigmatization of another cultural group.
And whereas the continued use of Native American symbols, images, logos, and nicknames as mascots undermines the ability of Native American tribal nations to portray respectful and accurate images of their history, culture, government, sovereignty, customs, and traditions. And whereas in 2001, the United States Commission on Civil Rights called for an end to the use of Native American images and team names by non-native schools, deeming them insensitive and a violation of anti-discrimination laws.
And whereas in 2005, the American Zoological Association called for immediate retirement of Native American symbols and images as mascot because of the harm caused by the social identity development and self-esteem of Native American students, and because non-Native American students witness perpetration of derogatory stereotypes.
And whereas continued use of Native American symbols, images, logos, and nicknames as mascots does not empower Native American students towards academic achievement and success, and whereas the use of whereas the use of stereotypical images of Native Americans by educational institutions indeed creates a racially hostile educational environment that may be intimidating to Native American students.
Whereas Wisconsin is comprised of 421 public school districts and approximately 31 districts retain use of Native American symbols, images, logos, or nicknames as mascots. And whereas the state of Wisconsin recognizes the importance of education regarding the 11 federally recognized tribes in its territory through Act 31, mainly through direct intervention and modeling on how to interact respectfully with people from different cultures.
And whereas the Wisconsin Association of School Boards and the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction report most school districts do not fully comply with Act 31 requirements, perpetuating forms of discrimination, oppression, and institutionalized racism. And whereas the elimination of stereotypes will make room for education about real Indian people, their contribution to world sustainability and heritage, current Native American issues and aspirations, and the rich variety of American Indian cultures in our country.
Therefore, be it resolved that the Eau Claire School Board calls on Governor Evers, the Wisconsin State Assembly, and the Wisconsin Senate to support state legislation that requires school districts to stop the institutional use of Native American symbols, images, logos, and nicknames as mascots, and witness whereof the undersigned, being all members of the school board for the Eau Claire Area School District, have executed this resolution this 19th day of August, 2019.
Followed by names and the rationale. Any questions or commentaries about this resolution? Hearing none, we'll need a motion to approve it.
I'll move to adopt the resolution.
Thank you. Moved by Dr. Nordin, and a second?
I'll second.
A second by Commissioner Kinkhammer. Those who approve the resolution, please say aye.
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 Those who oppose, same sign. And those who abstain, we have approved the resolution. Thank you very much. Our next point in the agenda is the staff survey results.
Hello again. I'm joined with Mark Goings tonight to give you an update on the surveying that we've done for our staff over the past year. In the past, our methodology had been an alternating year basis of having a K-12 staff engagement survey followed the next year by a staff focus group effort, where we dug it. We had a group come in from K-12 Insight to dig in deeper to some of the issues you saw in the survey the past year. Last year would have been another year for staff surveying, and we took a step back and decided to actually take a different strategy and try to synthesize a lot of surveying that's already taken place with our staff. And I did a little collection of the surveying that is just overseen by teaching and learning throughout the year to get input from our staff, and it's pretty significant, aside from doing the other surveying, that we've done in the past. So we really wanted to take a different tack this last year. And so Mark and I are going to share the strategies that we've used and how that data really, in the end, is trying to make us better as a district. When we talk about surveying, and we're going to get in a moment, we'll talk about how that fits into our overall data collection. You'll see in a moment some examples of how it fits into your first 4 strategic plan areas or priority areas. And so one of the things we like to talk about in terms of collecting data is we tend to look at data in 4 different domains. Achievement is what we often hear the most about, gets the most attention. How do our students do on different tests and measures that are run by the state? But we also look at demographic data in terms of the different students that we have. I know Commissioner Nordin, you just asked a question about this recently, about that demographics with Dr. Hardebeck and me. We also look at programmatic data, which is a data that shows what sort of programming we have. How many AP courses do we have? How many Project Lead the Way courses do we have? What sort of curricular programs do we have for math at our elementary, et cetera? So we have that programmatic data. And then finally, we have perception data. And perception data is, and it's funny because perception data can be quantitative or it can be qualitative, and much of what we have is qualitative, but you'll see some examples of both today that we both can look at some numbers that people give us in terms of their perception, and also just the anecdotal feedback, and then we start looking for themes. And so the focus on students to raise achievement and social emotional growth, those 2 first priority areas of the district, really helps us by collecting data in these 4 domains, can really help us with that, because we know that there are specific teacher practices that heavily influence students' achievement. And we also know that perception data of our staff can be influenced by demographics and the achievement of our students. So for example, we had a group of science teachers recently working and looking at, and they were digging into the data about the academic achievement and performance of students in science at the secondary level, and really started to hone in on a demographic area, one of the subgroups of students who experience poverty, and really have identified that as an area of focus that they want to work at moving forward. And so their feedback to us, after they went through and looked at those different data sets, was to really drive the goal setting for that department based on looking at those domains. And these domains purposely overlap with one another. So for that example that I just gave from science, it's really looking at this little space, but the perception data then that from them helped us then drive those next decisions in terms of where the focus would be for their work moving forward. So Mark is going to walk us through the next steps in terms of our focus, and then he'll give you some examples, and then I'll follow up with some other examples as well.
So ultimately, everything we do as a district should be about, it all should be about enhancing student growth, both academically and social emotional. Now, the way we go about that is through, in this picture, is supposed to represent some different ways we think about that. We can think about it in a traditional level as far as a certified teacher I could be an individual, and then I could work with the department and so on. And then, Jim is a representative of the district. And in those, one of the things we need to look at is how do each of these levels influence each other? And influence in the sense of how does each level let the other levels know what they need, where they could grow, and it's important that that conversation happens. And one of the things we found through some of our surveying is it seemed like one of the areas that we needed to work on as a district is this whole idea of that loop. And so, for example, as an administrator may find that, that we need to grow in this direction. Well, how do they hear from the individual classroom teacher? How do they hear from the department? And how does that all come together? And so then you look at how do those different areas respond. And so I would also challenge the board, I guess, to also look at it in a more abstract sense, in that each of us should see ourselves on each of these levels. Because as a classroom teacher, I need to think about, again, my individual room, my individual building, but I also need to think how that relates to my team and how can we strengthen that. And how can I perhaps help lead the district in an area, and which areas should I be prepared to help follow where we're going? Because all those parts need to work together. Because as a district, if we spend too much time in any one of those areas, things can start to break down. If we always think at 10,000 foot level, well, what does the implementation of that look like on the ground? Just like, as the other extreme, we can't have 800 different classrooms all acting as individuals because they need to connect and relate to the other areas. And so that's where the conversation between all these areas is so important, because each level as portrayed on this needs to be able to have meaningful conversation with the other levels, and some of that we do through data collection, through surveying, and that's what we're going to look at some more of. All right, so when we're understanding the current state, and so one of the things as ECAE has done, we wanted to look specifically at professional development. Because when you look at professional development, a few things on that. First of all, we all want to improve. If you go back to there, as a district, we want to improve. As a department, as an individual, we all want to go up. So that's a commonality. We also, in our current state, we have a calendar that has built-in professional development. I'm convinced that we have one of the state-of-the-art calendars that allows the time structurally that we need. Now the question is, what do we do with that time? How do we decide how we use that time? How do we hear from each other as far as how today's went and how we're going to change for next time? For example, as a classroom teacher, I could and I should have a state-of-the-art lesson plan. And I should have a state-of-the-art plan for where I'm going this week. But if I purely just implement my lesson plan, implementing a lesson plan is not responsive to what students need. Because it's important that during lesson one, I'm listening and I'm responding, and lesson one may not finish where I thought it was going to. Now we need to start out with that amazing plan, but we need to be able to respond. And that's part of this monitoring part. And that's one of the areas, since, as you can imagine, professional development is felt very dearly to all professionals. And if you ask any of them, they will tell you what they believe would help the most. But we do need to figure out a way to bring that together in a workable system. And that's when we look at the decision making. How do we go about deciding how that's going to be implemented? What will it look like? How much of our time will we spend at the district level, 10,000 foot level? How much time will we spend on the individual building level? How much in our PLCs and so on? And it's part of that balancing part. So here's an example. In 2018, our PD Wednesdays, as president of our Teachers Association, I was hearing grumblings about essentially the structure of what the PD Wednesday looked like. And we went early as part of a meet and confer with district leadership as far as, we're hearing some grumblings. Now, Dr. Hardebeck rightfully asked, well, let's see some data on this. Because it's one thing to hear grumblings, is grumblings 2 very vocal people? Or maybe it's 10. What is it? And so it's good to look into it a little bit more. And one of the things that we found in surveying staff, and we surveyed not only ECAE members, but it was important to us, since we're about improving our profession, we wanted to make sure to hear from all professionals at our districts. We sent out a survey to all members and non-members. And this is a breakdown in the middle school, high school component. When they looked at the questions up above there, was it more beneficial compared to last year? As you can see, that's a quantifiable mass of people who didn't feel it was an improvement. We looked at what that improvement was, or what the change was. And one of the things we found was at the secondary level, it was asked that they meet for PD Wednesdays in one place. So if you can, for example, like at Memorial High School, that may have meant that you had 80 staff members having PD Wednesday in the library. And when we looked at that, there was concerns about, well, if we're trying to do breakout groups, it's too loud, I can't hear. If you're trying to ask us, how do we implement this writing idea in science, it would have been helpful if we could have been meeting as a science department in our science room with our texts, because then we could say, okay, how can we put this in there? But we also felt there is a need at times to bring everybody together. To hear the one message sort of thing. It's kind of like those of you that have taught, there's times that you may do a whole group activity, you might break out into smaller groups. And so once we had the data, as part of the meet and confer, we met with district leadership and had the conversation about, it seems like this part of the structure of this system, this PD Wednesday, is getting in the way of staff growth. And we want to see the staff growth because we want to see our students grow. And then in that process, over that summer, as part of the principal's retreat, there was a discussion of, okay, what is it we want to do as a district? What flexibilities do we have to meet the needs of individual buildings? And so there has been some building choice. We still have to meet the same goal of the professional development, but it can look a little different. And so when you look at when we did our survey this last spring, there was significant growth in that area. Now, as another one, we also have the professional development, the PDIP days. These are the full days. And we asked our staff, what is it that you feel is the most influential on your growth? And from our staff, you can see the top 5 responses from 2018, 2019. And this, again, if you go back to those circles of trying to think about things at the building level, the district level, the department level, the individual level, this is saying that our staff values having time, that instructional planning time. What that concept is so if we're doing a building level professional development, when do we have time to take some of those ideas and talk about, okay, how am I going to break that down into my classroom? So we've talked about the big idea, how can we implement that? As also on there, you'll see several of those are PLC type things. Again, we need to grow in the area of reading. We need to grow in the area of math. But we also need to balance the different viewpoints that we're going about these things. And so those are a few of the things that our surveys were helping show is, again, the value of that ongoing conversation. I don't want the board or anyone to think this is something that needs to be fixed, because fixed makes it sound like it's a one and done. It's an ongoing thing. We always have new things happening in education, and we need to think from kind of like all parts of our brain. We need to use all parts of our district to help move us all forward. And Jim, we'll go back to you.
Thanks, Mark. So we're going to give you a few other, so Mark gave you a focus on a couple of major pieces of data that were collected by his team. We're going to walk you through just some examples of and some of the strategic priority areas of some other data that have been collected. And a lot of these data are qualitative in the themes that we've seen. But you can see already that in our priority area under academic achievement, these are different academic teams that we've pulled together that are either pre-K-12 teams or focusing on particular levels. For example, kindergarten clearly is in pre-K-12. But just to give you a little flavor for English Language Arts, we did foundational reading skills work with them at the end of the school year last year. And it was actually one of the post-survey, we did it at the very beginning and at the very end of that 3-day experience. And we had 99% of our teachers actually identified and agreed with an increased emphasis and importance on foundational reading skills at the K-5 level, which was, I haven't had too many surveys that actually come across that strong. We also had a very measurable increase in their content knowledge and confidence in implementing those skills. And it also showed us some areas that we need to focus on this year, and we started addressing that already with principals who will be working with their teams when they come together in another week. The math and science teams, and I talked a little bit about the science work. We did some surveying for both of these teams as an example, and they really helped drive the vision for each of these departments as they're working. So the math on a pre-K-12 and the science on a 6-12 level. Both groups kind of did a reset on their curricular work, and part of those resets really was developing a vision, and so that's the data that we collected from those teams. The social studies team, when actually, I think Dr. Bika, you've been part of this, when they do the August professional development, and that helped drive the feedback from that one, helped drive the work that we're going to be seeing again a week from Thursday, which we're pretty excited to have happen again. The district assessment system, this was a survey of all of our K-8 teachers, and really from that survey we recognized the need to review the screeners that we're currently using at the elementary level, PALS and DREA, the ones that you may have heard of in the past, and also to make some adjustments to the way we collect data. And actually those adjustments turn out to actually save us as a district about $27,000 because those adjustments that were recommended by the team actually require less time for needing a sub in the classroom. So that input from teachers not only was academic, it actually had a fiscal impact to us as well, which we were pretty excited about. And we also learned that from that team they want a little bit more input and support on how we help people understand the use of data in terms of when they, the term data-rich, information poor. They've been asking for more of that, and we've been responding and preparing for that this year. The last three I'm going to touch on a little bit: kindergarten, the middle school, and the academic career planning, because I also have them in this group. So we've also done some surveying of teacher teams in these areas, and the Social Emotional Learning Committee, and this has been, we actually went to every building, Dr. Zhang and I did, and met with every leadership team, and then had those leadership teams take the 24 social emotional learning competencies of the state and actually help us map back what our current practice is in the district. So when we looked at these practices, we were trying to understand, like, what is our current state? Remember when Mark showed that slide, the 3 different things we're doing on feedback? We really need to understand our current state. So we really went to every building and asked the leadership teams to work with every teacher to help us understand what is happening across the district before we started actually making any sort of changes. And that data has been used by the committee, and they've got some exciting work that we'll update you on soon. In the early learning area, conscious discipline is one of our key areas, and in terms of our behavior supports. And the feedback we've gotten from the staff at the early learning level is that that implementation has gone extremely well. But teachers have still felt unsure about there's a concept called Safe Place, and they've had some struggles in terms of that implementation. And from that feedback, we're able to make some adjustments and support them in that implementation. In kindergarten, we actually went out to every elementary school and met with, again, leadership team, or not the leadership teams, the kindergarten teams and principals. And we've been doing a lot of work on play-based learning that you've heard about. And that feedback, we then surveyed, we met with them on our current plan, and the feedback from that team helped drive some of the work we're doing. So some of the things that they wanted to see was a specific adjustment to minutes of the day, which we then made that changes and then asked for them for feedback on those minutes. And the second piece that they asked for was better clarity and definition on what play-based learning was. And so we're actually bringing in some training to help support them when that begins a week from Thursday. At the middle school level, we're doing a middle school program review right now, and we actually met with all 3 middle school staffs and did survey that team, or each of those teams, to help us understand the priorities they want to see in their vision statement, because their vision is going to help drive the structure of their work moving forward. And finally, academic and career planning. The staff have implemented each month at the secondary level academic career plan lessons, and we've asked them specific feedback about how those lessons and the implementation have gone. And the staff have told us that they want those lessons to be more interactive. So they believe in the concept, but they want more interactivity. And the ACP lessons to focus on not just we're doing it, but why. And so this summer, the guidance counselors have met to redesign those lessons to support the feedback we receive from our staff. So again, that's part of that piece that Mark talked about in terms of monitoring our work. I'm not going to spend much time on mentors and mentees because we did that last week, and we shared, or I keep saying last week, 2 weeks ago when we shared that. I don't have one up here also about technology. We're doing an implementation where we're shifting from Google Classroom to Canvas as our learning management system. And staff have told us that we need to promote Canvas and provide them time to make that transition. And so we built that into the budget and created space for staff to do that, and brought in some external expertise as well. On the special education, we asked staff, we did a survey from them on the programming supports that they need, and they told us that we have a lot of differing needs, and they just, in the limited time that we have, they need that support during the PDIP afternoons. So one of the things that we allow is to bring together district teams, and they've asked for more support during that time when we have those on the PDIP afternoons. Hourly staff, so Kay meets with our traditional classified staff, our buildings and grounds, and our food nutrition staff, representatives from there in terms of their needs. And actually from those meetings, we did some really innovative, given the change in scheduling at the end of last year, we did some pretty innovative things to support those staff in terms of offerings. One of the things we had was for example, was SEAs, our special education assistants, a little bit more support on their own wellness. We offered a workshop for them down at the Lismore. We got super positive feedback on that, but that was one example of professional development that stemmed out of conversations and feedback. So that actually was a little less like a survey and a little bit more like a focus group, but it helped drive some of that, and the feedback we got from those changes was extremely positive. On the leadership teams, a couple things with principals is we meet with them, and we tell you about this, that we meet every month. We exit ticket from that every month. We actually ask them the same 3 questions. What was helpful? What do you need more information on? What do you want to see in future meetings? And we drive our agenda setting based on that feedback. But we also did a survey for both leadership teams and the administration building staff on their engagement. And the things we heard from them was, and this was really kind of exciting, that overall these teams felt an extremely high commitment to quality in their work, and I'm looking at the mission statement, a tie to the district's mission, and also that they appreciate clear expectations from their supervisors and those that they work for. They were asking for, again, more recognition, and we continue to try to tease out what that means in terms of what sort of recognition they're after. We think it's a lot more from as we talk with our staff, those small bits of recognition, not something where I put someone's name and face up and we celebrate, but just a little bit more like, hey, great job, I really appreciate that you did that and that you're noticing and giving that feedback. And they also want more conversations about how they're doing with their jobs and how they contribute to the district, more feedback on their contributions. And that surveying, again, has helped us change some of our practices, and it's just another example of this whole, if I can give you a visual, think of a web. There's a lot of these different feedback sources that are helping us to improve our program and practices and support our staff to be as effective as they can be, and in the end have a positive influence on our students. So with that, Mark and I are, either one of us or in tandem, can take your questions.
Thank you very much. Questions from the board members? Commissioner Vu?
Thank you for the presentation. I just want to ask a quick questions. Last year, 2018, you have less people participating in the survey, I believe. This year you have 223. What helped bring up that number?
Are you referring to
The last slide,
this
very
one?
last.
This was the last slide, or the last one that had? Oh, yeah, so, right, so the last, that was, I mentioned the slide got switched around, so the one that you're seeing in board docs is actually, the last slide is this slide right here. Yeah, sorry about that.
Yeah, so in that one, we just set up the certified staff, and we had approximately 25 to 30%, depending on the year, that we got the respondents. And then if you're asking about, so the top 5 responses, in order to quantify it, so you'd have an unlimited number. We had like 10 different, indicators, and they ranked the ones that they felt were the most beneficial. So in this example, 56.5% of the respondents felt that instructional planning was the most beneficial. Does that answer your question?
Just for clarification, so the 223, that's not representing all the people participating in the survey.
Oh, I see. Oh, he's talking about this one right here, this number.
Yeah, yes. For that survey, for that question, we had 223 people respond for this question 9. And so of that 223 people, this is how they ranked it.
So 126 chose the first
Right.
choice, right?
Oh, sorry. Yes, number 9. Number 9, well, one thing we'll be trying to do this, anybody that's done a survey, you don't have the survey too long. And so we had the PD Wednesday survey separate from the PDIP days. And it happened that when we gave that one, the 126, it was at a time, imagine this, even in 2018 we had a few snow days and a few gaps. And so ultimately that hurt our response. So out of the 4 surveys, that was actually the lowest response we had. Sorry,
I have a question. Have you had the chance to find if there is any correlation between these survey outcomes with student outcomes?
That's where I'd say it's part of the conversation. There is data on that. The number one thing that a school board can affect as far as the quality of education for a student is to have a high quality instructor with them on a normal basis. And so what we're looking at that, in order to have and keep high quality instructors, in this sense, we all need to continue to evolve. And so that's where we need to make sure in that circle that we are able to clearly communicate that this is an area that I need help in, I need to grow in, because when you look at the people on the ground, they'll come to me, or they might come to the principal and say, this is what I'm seeing in my kindergarten class. What do we have for materials? What do we have for supports? What do we have for needs? And so that's where, in looking at how do we communicate that to each other, because we're a big ship. And so, how does someone in Jim's position know about these more nimble changes that we're seeing in our student population? And then how do we bring that about? And again, one of the things I hear a lot is time. And there is research that, like PLCs, for example, PLCs, they need time to grow. They need time to develop. Where does that come? How does that fit into these days that we have? And so while, you know, we did not tie any direct one of these to, you know, we saw this uptick, that's why it's part of the conversation, because when we do talk with each other, you know, Jim's a wonderful resource as far as he's the person that can show me, well, here's 57 studies that shows, you know, this kind of thing. But sometimes we just need to be able to be sure that we're all hearing these different needs and desires to help grow.
Thank you.
I'd like to just weigh in on one thing, and you know, one of the things that we heard from our meetings in Meet and Confer, particularly at the elementary level, was the frustration that teachers were feeling about the PD that they were getting in ELA, and also about the lack of results that they were getting with their students. So as a result of those conversations and conversations that I was having with individual leadership teams from the elementary schools, and also in the faculty meetings that I attend, it became obvious that we needed to do something different, and we weren't quite sure what to do to increase our scores. And this year we started on those foundational skills with a real emphasis on how to teach those foundational skills. And we're finding that, you know, that's an area of professional development that our elementary teachers desire. And as we said, when we brought in some PD for them in August, we got a very high rating, 95%, that it was helpful. So will we see results improve this year? I don't know, but we're trying to listen to what they are asking us for and provide that for them. And it's all based on research.
Thank you. That was my question. Any other questions? Hearing none, we're going to thank for your report. I appreciate your effort to explain this process to us, and we encourage to move forward and keep doing the good work that you're doing. It is 8:45, and we have our last item in the agenda, request for future agenda items. Perhaps maybe this is not an agenda item, but if we could have a conversation about the possibility of having a secure entrance for Roosevelt included in the budget. At some point we can have a report on that.
We can bring that back to you.
Thank you very much. The agenda setting committee will meet tomorrow at 8 o'clock. So I'll need a motion to adjourn the session.
I'll make a motion.
Motion by Commissioner Klinkhammer, and a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Vu. Those who approve, say aye.
Aye.
The session is adjourned.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the Eau Claire Area School Board. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.